4,300,000, 4,350,000. Here we go. 4,350,000 once, 4,350,000 twice. On a sale. Sold. 4,350,000.
Welcome to another Block Chaser podcast, where we speak with the most notable people in the collector car auction market. From buyers and sellers to industry leaders, we deliver the pulse of the collector car auction market right to you. You'll hear the stories behind the people, the auctions, and the cars that are bought and sold at auction.
Welcome, everybody, to another Block Chaser podcast. Today's guest is Stephen Becker, President and CEO of Stephen Becker Automotive Group. We'll be talking auctions, and Stephen will be sharing some of his expertise, including collector car inspections and valuation, the state of the collector car market, a few of the world records Stephen has set at auction, and barking cars. You're going to like this. Now, a few things to know about Stephen. He's a licensed dealer who buys and sells largely American muscle. He became business partners with Carroll Shelby when Stephen was only in high school and remained partners with him all the way through his passing in 2012. He's one of the foremost leading experts in the world on Shelby Cobras and Mustangs. The best way to find out more about Stephen and his business is at backerautogroup.com. Let's get started. It's David O'Hara from Block Chaser. Stephen, I want to hear from you in your words. What are some of the things that you're doing, some of the core things you're doing today with collector cars?
Well, David, thank you for having me on your show, first off. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Certainly an honor to speak with you and be dealing with you. I've followed Block Chaser for years and certainly enjoy the content that I receive each week in my email.
Thank you.
The focus really right now for me is telling my customers, my clients, and future customers and clients what is going on in the marketplace. It seems that there has been 5 or 6 years between 2010 and 2015 or 16 that have kind of just disappeared, where the activity in the market was very, very stagnant. We didn't see a whole lot of activity, a whole lot of action one way or the other. I think when everything went to crap in 2008, I think if you had sold your collector car after everything fell apart, you probably would have lost money. Had you held on to it through 2015, you probably would have held even money. And if you held on to it today, for most of the account, you probably would make money. So very much like the stock market, everybody is trying to figure out where the high is, where the low is, and exactly what direction the market is headed in the future.
I know you do a lot of valuations and inspections and, certainly a lot more than that, but this is really where you come in, right? You can really help people understand their cars, figure out where to get the cars, how to sell them, and really understand what they're worth, what's a good car, what's not, what's right, what's been, unmolested, as we say. Is this really where you come in the market?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I do and have done for decades is really keep my clients and customers informed, be it a buyer or a seller, on what I am specifically seeing boots on the ground. And, one of the really cool things about 10 years ago is the NADA Classic, Antique, and Muscle Car Guide asked me to be on their board of advisors. So actually, once every 3 months, I actually get an email from them and they query me based on my sales. And they query me based on whether or not I feel that their positioning in the marketplace is too high, too low, just perfect, only for the specific types of cars that I deal in. So, if they ask me what they thought of a value in their book of a 69 GT500 Shelby, I would be able to tell them whether or not they're spot on or they're high or they're low. But if they ask me the same thing for a 1999 Porsche 911, I would have no clue. So I don't even go there. I think that being able to have that happen and being able to be on that board with, another dozen or so guys like myself around the country and all the different brands, makes, and models really allows us to be able to pool information together to give the customer the very, very best advice.
And how does this tie into the auction market, right? So NADA, great for dealers, private buyers, those types of things. How do we start to understand the values at the auction market? Is that something you just have to be really in tune to? Like I know you are. How do our listeners understand the market? Because it's a tough one.
It is. It is. And that's a great question, David. And that's a question that cannot be answered in one single sentence. But I'll try to give you what I tell people. One of the first things I tell people when they contact me is that the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. And that goes across the board, be it buying, selling, be it private, be it dealer, be it auction. If you don't ask the question, or if you do, if you ask a dumb question, there is no such thing as a dumb question. So I think when talking about the collector car market as far as auctions go, it's a totally different ballgame than dealer sales and private sales, because you have a tremendous amount of people, as Steve Davis, my good friend from Barrett-Jackson, always says, pay attention. And he's up there on the block and he's like, pay attention to this car, pay attention to this pricing, pay attention to these segments, because these are what's going on right now. And when you're at an auction house, be it like a Barrett-Jackson or a Mecum, you've got a captive audience that has been verified to be able to purchase car that is on the stage. And as opposed to dealing with somebody that might have to go get permission from a wife or a husband, or somebody that has to go get financing, or somebody that has to sell their firstborn in order to buy the car, these folks are checkbook in hand, drink in hand, food in hand, ready to write a check for the car that comes across the block that suits their fancy. So, sometimes we'll be sitting there, and I know you experience this, David, and we'll see a car that has a value of X, and it ends up going for Y, which is more than X. Or you have one that you have a value where you think the car is worth X, and it goes for a different value that's less than that. And it's just, you never know it. If there's two people in the room that are going after the car, chances are the car is probably going to bring more than current market value. But if we were to use those, and NADA does use those to a degree, but if you were to use some of the valuations, you could really swing the market one way or the other, either to your favor or to your disadvantage, depending on the brand of the car. So I think that it's two totally different people. I don't know if I've ever had an intersection where I've had clients that have bought cars at Barrett-Jackson and also bought cars from me privately or dealer-wise. Very, very few people cross those two paths.
Two different breeds, you're saying?
Two different breeds, two totally different people.
Well, I want to get more into your business and your expertise. And, I know you have a lot to share with our listeners, but let's talk auctions for a second. I mean, this is Block Chaser. So I want to ask you, do you remember the first auction that you went to? Can you think? I mean, I'm sure it was a long time ago, right?
Yeah, it was actually. It was in the mid 1980s. And it was in Atlanta, and it was a cruise auction down at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, and it was right during the time that the Shelby American Automobile Club had their national convention there in Atlanta, and it was the first and only time they've ever had their convention in Atlanta.
Right.
And I remember being there, and I actually was auctioning off a red 69 GT350 car. And I got up on the block, and there was probably, 6,000 or 7,000 people out there, and the car just didn't go anywhere.
Oh.
And I picked up the mic, and the guy handed me the mic and asked me to explain about the car. And I said, look, guys, Carroll Shelby could die tomorrow, and this car will go up in value even more than what you're paying today. And what was interesting was my wife gave me this horrid look like, oh, my God, I can't believe you just said that. But in the same respect, it did take the car up another, notch or two, which made it worth my time and my trip. But I remember that as being the very first auction I went to, and I went away, and she goes, boy, you better hope Carroll never finds out what you just said about him. Now, again, remember, that was 25, 30 years ago.
Sure.
So it was very, very interesting to see that work out. But I remember that being my very first real auction that I went to.
And the first time barking, perhaps, right? You really barked the car on that one.
Oh yeah, no, I did. That was the first time I ever barked, and that's the reason I have no problem barking all the way up right until now and beyond.
That's unbelievable. So tell me a little. Well, I mean, for me, my first auction, I was young enough. I don't think I was buying or selling a car, but I think you were buying and selling younger than I was for sure. But tell me about something memorable, something you bought or sold at auction. It could be something recent, something maybe that set a record. Let me just tell you that I have never purchased at an auction. Right.
And it's not because of the value of the car or the quality of the car or anything. It's just that I hate giving the auction company 10% of the final selling price. That's my commission on a majority of the deals that I do on the sales end. So it feels like it's a pass through, if you know what I mean. It feels like the auction company is passing through to me. And I've probably kicked myself in the butt more than not, as far as, oh my gosh, I should have bought it. I should have just eaten the 10% everybody else does. And then I could have turned around and held it for X amount of time and made, this much more. But so that is a confession from me that I have actually never, ever bid before.
You heard it here first.
Never ever done that. So
well, you certainly bid on other people's behalf. You bought cars for them. Yeah, right?
You know what, though? I have in as much, but I very rarely do that as well, because typically I'm up on stage or whatever and nobody can get to me to ask me if, whether or not I'd have an interest. I mean, I remember I had one guy that had a 65R model GT350 $1 million car, and it got to like 450 and it died, and he looked at me and I'm thinking, well, hell, I'll pay 650 for it just as it sits. And I mean, I really would have written a check right there. So I raised my badge, and Craig Jackson looks over at me and he does a double take. He's like, I can't believe Becker's bidding on something. So I did, and I bid, and I would have paid 650. But once I got to 650, it lingered, and then it went right up to $1 million. But it's very interesting.
Well, how about sales? You've had some great sales.
Had some wonderful.
You had a world record just recently, I think.
Had a world record, a couple world records. 2008, Carol and I sold his 69 GT500 convertible that he had owned since new. And that car was projected to bring $300,000 to $400,000. And that car actually brought $850 by the time the hammer was all in. So that was a world record that has never been beat. That world record has never been beat for a 69 or 70 GT500 convertible, or probably even something close to that. So, and then I set one last year in Las Vegas with a 1999 Shelby Series 1 car that was targeted at between 90 and 110, and the car ended up bringing over $200,000. So, you don't know, and you do the very, very best presentation you can do. You be as honest as you possibly can, almost honest to the fault. And then you create an air about the car and about yourself that people want to know more.
So you mentioned the Series 1 world record. And what's interesting is, do you have any take on, that car, right, wasn't terribly value, and it seems like just this year they shot up. Is that accurate to say?
It's accurate to say that the value of the car was somewhere in the $100,000 to $120,000 range, and that it brought almost twice the money. It's accurate to say that, the auction houses had a lot of them this January, because my car sold at Barrett-Jackson, Las Vegas in September. So there were a lot of people that were like on the sidelines and like, now I got to sell my car. And I think some good money was brought in. I think that probably brought the market up a good 20% on that particular car.
And did you have a sense that the Series 1 was prime now, for example? People can be reactionary. They can see cars sell. But that's an example of a car that shot up this year.
Yeah, no, look, man, the last couple of years, you can always, at an auction, you can almost always count on some type of a 1965 to 1970 Shelby Mustang, right, some type of a Shelby Series 1, some type of a Ford GT, some type, you can, there's certain cars you can always count on. I see a 442 Oldsmobile or a Hurst Oldsmobile at every single auction. I see, there's certain things that you see at every single auction that you can almost count on like gospel are going to be there selling.
Right.
And so I just think that, they made 249 of them. There's probably 200 left. And I think people are realizing now, as we go into the 20th year since their production, which seems amazing, they were built in 1999, that they're beginning to regain their value.
So segueing to your business, I know these are not going to auction. That said, you are selling, I believe, for one of your clients, a series of cars, or I should say 6 vehicles, the development cars, I believe, of the Series 1. And I'm not trying to make this all about Series 1 here, but this is something really unique. And tell us a little bit about those cars.
Yeah, every single car that is built goes through a development stage. And that is from the guy sitting down or the lady sitting down and drafting an overview of the car, what it looks like, sketching out the car, all the way to clay production, all the way to wind tunnel testing, crash testing, all the way to pre-production fit and finish. And every single car goes through that. And those are what you would commonly refer to as prototype cars. And typically at the end of your end game on that car as a manufacturer is to manufacture that car. And when that's done, then you move your team on to another car. And typically anything that led up to the day of that manufacturing, as far as prototype goes, gets crushed. Well, in the case of the Shelby Series 1 car, Carroll maintained control of all of the prototype cars, of all the different pre-production cars, et cetera. And at the end of the day, instead of crushing them or selling them off, they are now bunched together as 6 cars from clay to, from a clay car that's totally clay to a dynamic car to an EPA test car and everything. And we've got those being offered in one group so that somebody could actually come in and say, I own from day one until start day of production, everything that the Shelby Series 1 represented. Display cars, the motor trade and car and driver car, all these different cars that made history with the Shelby Series 1 car. And you don't ever see that. You see bits and pieces of it. You see, somebody with a Corvette that has a 1983 Corvette, when in fact they started building them in 1984 and they only made like 6 of the 1983s. And that was a changeover year. So he has one of 6 or something to that effect. You don't see a lot of people coming out that have pre-production cars, that have prototypes and especially things like clay models and stuff, because generally the manufacturer just reuses those cars.
I saw some pictures on your website and it's unbelievable. You really have to think about what you're looking at. But one of them is actually the crash test vehicle, which you would actually think would be in a lot worse shape. And I don't know what that says, if that's good or bad, but it's one of the 6 cars that are on there. I mean, it's unbelievable, some of the stuff that you have. It is.
And it needs to find a home. It needs to find a museum. It needs to find somebody and there are a lot of aficionados out there on the Shelby Series 1. There are a lot more people trying to buy them than they did build the cars. And I think that still holds true for today. But for somebody that wants something to put on display or to show their buddies or just to be able to look at and say, wow, I own something from conception to consignment, or from conception to production, that is pretty much the only game in town.
That's unbelievable. So let's talk a little bit about some of the different things that you do, and let's offer some nuggets here to our listeners, some advice, some things they can learn from buying, right? So not necessarily at auction, buying private sale. What are some of the key things that you would advise people to do when they're buying a vehicle? And maybe it's different for different values, for the affordable market versus mid versus premier market. It might be different, but give us a few pointers. What are the key things that you see? And maybe it's people aren't checking these things. What should they be looking for?
Right. Well, and again, that's another great question there. That's another thing that you pointed out here, is that I tell people to always buy the most they can afford. I always tell people, and I'm not trying to put somebody into a car they can't afford, they're going to not make payments on it or lose it or whatever. But I try to tell people, look, the different, if you go looking at the exact same car and one car is 90 and one car is 100, and the car at 90 needs its air conditioning system replaced and needs the interior replaced, and the car at 100 is done, just the time alone of what it would take you to get all that work done is to most people is worth the 10 grand. So I tell them to buy the very, very best that they can afford within a reason. Right. And then I tell them to make absolutely sure that you have me standing there representing you, looking at the car, inspecting the car, following through with the deal, doing all the due diligence, because the devil's in the details. And I have saved a tremendous amount of people, a tremendous amount of money over the last 35 years or so, where, they were getting ready to write these huge 6-figure checks for a car. And I got there and within 15 minutes figured out the car wasn't even real. And then instead of just telling them, I would show them why it wasn't real, what they need to look for, what are the points, what are the counterpoints. And to these guys, that's the best money that they've ever spent in their life.
So it's your job to upset the seller or the buyer. You can upset one guy and make the other guy as happy as possible.
Well,
that's what you do.
That's exactly right. And actually, I had a really great one last week. I got called up. A gentleman called me up from Arizona, and he said, "I'm flying in North Carolina tomorrow. I want you to be in North Carolina tomorrow." I found a 2006 Ford GT basically in a barn. And I said, "Wow, the cars are that old now that they're already finding them in the barn." And he laughed and he said, "Yeah, I found one. It's got 500 miles, original owner, and it's pop, pop, pop." And so he paid me, I get $2,500 a day plus travel. That rate has never changed in 35 years. It's always been the exact same. And so he paid me, and I drove up 5 hours into the North Carolina mountains where there was no cell service. And I went and looked at this car, and sure as heck, there it was, 500 miles, and it had been maintained since new. And he wanted to fight the guy on the price. And I said, "Look, the price is already 50 grand less than the market." I said, "You could actually take this car. If you don't buy the car, I'm going to buy it," which I didn't say, but that's what I was thinking. Right. And of course, I'd have to give him back his $2,500 if I did that. But I'm just thinking, this is thinking out loud. But this is what I told him. And I said, "Dude, if you don't buy this car," I said, "you're leaving 50 grand on the table." And he said, "Well, my intention is not to resell it." I said, "Even better." I said, "You got a $50,000 head start." And I said, "The cars are doing nothing but going up in value." So I said, for you to try to kick this guy for $5 grand or whatever, I said, you're going to piss him off. He's going to shut the door in your face. And you're going to lose a good car. Right. And then the same holds true with cars that I can tell you about where I flew into Chicago snowstorms and it was minus 15 degrees below zero. And I'm in Sandwich, Illinois, which is the murder capital of Illinois. And I'm in a body shop at 10 o'clock at night. And I point out certain things to the guy that owns the car. And the guy asked me to step outside for a second. I step outside and he shuts the door on me and he says, "Go home." And I'm out in freezing cold. I'm out in minus 10 degree weather with no cell phone because we didn't have them at that time. And I'm trying to figure out how the heck to get back to the airport. But, I saved my client a lot of stress.
a lot of emotions and all this, right?
A lot of emotions. I have learned how to very, very, very carefully dance around things, but yet be able to put my point through. I was probably in the one in Illinois back in the late 90s. I was probably a little too blunt. I was probably a little too cocky. I probably told the guy when I looked at it, if he's ever heard of the word rust. Or ask a definition of what you said this was a rust-free car in Illinois. Is this considered to be a rust-free car? Because down south, it's not.
Might mean something different up there. You just don't know.
That's exactly right. So, those were two extremes.
Right. So what are some of the other things that, some of the other areas of expertise, some of the other services that you offer? Tell me something else you're doing a lot of.
Yeah. Appraisals. Appraisals and valuation. Got a lot of things going on right now at the marketplace. Got a lot of cars changing hands because the changing of the guard has started. So you've got guys that own these cars for 15, 20, 30 years, and they're getting up in age, and they either can't drive them anymore, they don't want to drive them anymore, or they have lost interest, or their family, who would be the recipient of these cars after they died, has no clue what they are, could care less what they are, and just want to get on with their lives. So not everybody's a musclehead, not everybody's a muscle car guy, not everybody's a car guy. So got a lot of people that are hiring me now to fly in and do valuations on their collections and to advise their trusted advisors what I think they should be doing with their cars, what cars should be in there, what cars shouldn't be in there, formulating a game plan for the individual as far as, if he were to die tomorrow and neither one of his sons were interested in the cars, could I sell them off? Would I sell them off? How would I make sure that his family is protected or their family is protected? So I'm doing a tremendous amount of that. I'm probably on the road 80 days out of the year, just doing nothing but appraisals and valuation.
Well, that's the key thing, right? What the heck is it worth? And people will say it's whatever someone's willing to pay, but you got to know what to pay and you got to know what to charge.
Right. That's exactly right. And that is exactly right. And I think that, if you have a car collection that's worth 70, if you got a car that's worth 75 grand, you got a car that's worth 175 grand, you got a car that's worth $1.75 million, you need to have your valuations in line. You need to have these paperwork and these documents. God forbid something were to happen to the car or to you, and nobody would know what to do with it.
All right. Well, before we have a little fun here at the end, and I'm going to start some statements and let you finish them, and we're going to hear about some fun things that you've probably done over the years in cars. I want to ask, there's a lot of changes in the market. Earlier on, you mentioned some of the different segments and, areas that values were up, they were down. I mean, that's just the nature of the market. But specifically, let's talk about muscle cars for a second, because there's so much talk about muscle cars, and the millennials coming up don't care about them. Perhaps they don't even know how to shift. Perhaps they don't own cars that they might not even own cars at all. So what's the change you see? What's the future of muscle cars? And, our audience, we have the full gamut, right? From people don't even have their license up to, retired folks who are in the sunset of their careers, or even, spending lots of money on muscle cars. But there's lots of talk and there's lots of concern. Where do you see it all going?
That's
question.
a great question. That's really an easy question. Right on. No.
I got a friend who's unloading his muscle cars and buying Italian exotics just because he's worried about the value of muscle cars. So I want to hear your take on it.
Well, I think that, there are certain blue chip cars, be it muscle cars, Italian cars. There are certain cars that will always bring the money. And there are certain cars that will always be, a guaranteed closer at an auction or at an individual's collection. There's like people that want these particular bookends. And in the Ford side, it's a Ford GT, and it's a 1965 GT350. On a Chrysler side, it would be a Hemi Cuda convertible and a Plymouth Superbird Hemi, something to that effect. So every manufacturer has a set of bookends. I'm concerned about the millennials, in as much as the fact that the millennials, by the time they're done, starting to learn how to drive, most cars don't have stick shifts anymore. I don't know whether or not they're that interested. I mean, you got, the perception of global warming. You've got the next group of people coming in that don't want to really own a house with a big yard. They don't really want to. They don't want to do what their predecessors did. And one of those is owning a big, nasty muscle car that, sends gas into the air and fumes and burning rubber and everything else, the things that all your viewers like.
Well, next to fresh air, that's my favorite smell.
Right, exactly. So I think that, for the foreseeable future, I think unless we have some god-awful crazy something happen where all of a sudden they outlawed gas cars, like they're trying to do in Europe, where, there's some countries like France that are saying by 2025, we will not have gas cars on the road anymore. Right. Well, good for you. It's a good thing. The only thing I could think that France ever made was the C-Tron, and those things fell apart on the factory line. So I'm not too concerned about that one. But, I think that, or a Peugeot, but I think that, for the foreseeable future, I think that you're going to see people be interested in these cars as they come up. They're buying these cars, and I don't see a whole huge shift, so to speak, as far as all of a sudden one day we're going to wake up and these cars will be worth nothing.
So the sky is not falling.
No.
No. All right. Hey, listen. So it's been great talking with you a little bit here. What I want to do is have, a little bit of a speed round. I want to start some statements or sentences and want to have you finish them. What do you say?
That sounds like a plan.
All right. This is where I get to start to put some words in your mouth, but then you get to finish it.
Okay.
The auction house that describes my style is?
Barrett-Jackson. I'm a loyal follower of Barrett-Jackson. I'm a loyal seller there. I'm personal friends, good friends with Craig Jackson and Steve Davis, who run the auction house, and they have got it going on. They have got their T's crossed, their I's dotted, and they know exactly what they're doing.
And it's a rock show. I know you've been to a few of those.
It's a rock show. It's a rock show. There's no doubt about it. It's like a Kiss concert without Kiss. They got the lights, they got the music, they got the excitement, they got the wine, women, and song. And that auction house is almost 45 years old, and they just know how to do it, what to do with it, and how to make it work.
All right, next one. Why would someone ever
buy a car without getting a third party opinion? Why would somebody ever buy a car, a used car? Obviously not a new one, but a used one. Why would somebody, and that just doesn't go for muscle cars and stuff. That goes for any car. Why would you go buy a 3 or 4 year old Corvette without going to a Corvette expert or somebody that specializes in that type of car to have them just, if nothing else, give it a once over to make sure you're not buying something that wasn't wrapped around a tree 6 months prior?
Sage advice. All right, here we go. Did that guy just pay?
Way over value for that car.
See it all the time.
See it all the time.
And they try to say they don't care. Just that's their defense.
They try to say they don't care. This is after hiring me. I'm standing next to them and I'm like, no, stop. You're whoa. And they get the octane in their blood, man. And they can't ever come back to me and say, you had me get into a car that was worth less than what I paid for it or whatever, because they're right there and they're on top of it and I can't stop them.
All right. Another one. You ready?
Yep.
Why aren't there any
stick shift cars left in this world? What have we become when we have everything at the push of a button as opposed to actually getting in there and grinding gears?
I'm going to go get my Keurig and make another coffee.
Right. See?
All right. Biggest mistake I made was?
Not purchasing a car that I knew was extremely rare and very reasonably priced, thinking that I could get it for less later on and finding out quite different.
We know better even as we're doing it, right? Instincts.
Even as we're doing it. You just want to save that extra you want to save that extra 500 or that extra 5,000. What you don't realize is you're jumping over dollars to get to dimes.
Right. All right. And the last one here, ending on maybe a positive note, depending on how you answer this. I love it when I see
people enjoying their cars in their life.
That's true, right?
Yes.
It is about enjoyment.
It is.
Well, Stephen, I think people have picked up some good tips here. It's been good learning more about you and your business. And I think some of the big takeaways I know here is I probably wouldn't buy a house without a real estate agent. So maybe I'm not going to buy a car without at least getting some sort of expert opinion. It doesn't have to be you. It doesn't have to be just someone who's going to make sure I'm doing the right thing, no matter how much I think I know. Is that true to say?
Yeah, that's a good one. You can buy a house with a real estate agent. You can buy one with a for sale by owner. But either way you go, you're going to hire a third-party inspector to come in and look at that house to make sure you're not buying a bucket of bolts.
Everyone's fine with real estate agents, or most people. They're fine with using lawyers. It's not always good representing yourself. But for some reason, people want to fly blind, even when they have some expertise, not buying a car without getting expert inspection.
That's correct.
Stephen, it's been great having you on. I think our listeners have certainly picked up some good tips. I've really enjoyed it. And I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you as well, David. Thanks to your viewers and your listeners. And I'm available anytime for a free telephone consultation. If anybody ever wants to ask me any questions, like I said in the beginning, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask. So I'm here for you guys.
And what number do they reach you at?
770-900-5532 or Stephen@BeckerAutoGroup.com.
All right. If you need his expertise or you just want to say hi. All right, Stephen, thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Thank you. I appreciate it, David.
We hope you enjoyed this Block Chaser podcast. To stay up on the pulse of the collector car auction market, visit blockchaser.com for a complete auction calendar and to sign up to receive our auction update emails. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and other major social media platforms. To contact us, simply email us at info@blockchaser.com. This podcast is copyright 2019 Block Chaser Incorporated. Any use of these materials must be with the consent of Block Chaser.